Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris, tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us as we continue to do the show remotely. I am pleased to be joined today by Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris. Mayor Harris, thanks for joining us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Along with Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. I'll start with, as we record this Thursday morning, Mayor Harris, generally the trends in the numbers on COVID are not great. Some are a little startling in terms of the positivity rate of the testing being up. Hospitalizations had a big jump. They've come a little down, but they're still trending upward. Is it time for us to step back from phase two, or are we safe staying where we are in terms of the level of reopening we have in Shelby County?
So I think we are watching the numbers carefully, and I think we'll do whatever it takes to keep people safe in our community. One of the really harsh realities is that the virus will probably be with us for the rest of the year, if not the rest of our lives. And so given that fact, you have to figure out a way to responsibly and carefully enter into a recovery phase while at the same time trying to keep people as safe as possible. We're in the long-term mode right now. I think you've heard our director of health describe it as the marathon part of this process. It's the idea that this virus isn't going anywhere. And so how do you make sure you communicate messages to people about the importance of social distance and all the kinds of ways we can prevent the spread as we enter the recovery phase? But yes, if it is necessary, and the data suggests that we should go back, then I think we're all prepared to do that. But we are, kind of in a long-term phase here at this moment.
Two follow-up questions. I mean, one, what is the data point or points that would compel you to want to go backwards?
So with respect to the raw numbers, those are not a telltale sign of whether or not we are doing well or not too well, because those raw numbers are going to fluctuate, and we've seen those raw numbers fluctuate since we've started this process. Instead, it takes a careful analysis of all the data, and it takes the opinion of the experts in both public health and the medical fields to guide us. So one of the things we look at is positivity rate. That's the number of raw confirmed cases over the number of tests that are given. And generally, we want our positivity number to be below 10%. So far, I believe it has been below 10%, although on any given day, it may have surpassed 10%, and that should give us all worry. Hospital capacity, one of the reasons why we delayed phase 3 a couple of times was because hospital capacity, we started to hear feedback from medical professionals around their ability to take care of folks that had respiratory illnesses and their capacity being used up. And so we wanted to make sure that we slowly slow things down a bit while we looked at more data around hospital capacity. Public health capacity is ongoing work. We continue to build the capabilities of the health department because they will be needed over the long term to help manage and administer so much of our response to COVID. And of course, our testing capacity is really, really strong. So that's the one piece I think we probably can check off at this point. We feel like we have capacity to do at least 2,000 tests a day right now. And so that's great capacity. We're probably one of the best testing communities in the state or in the country.
All right. Well, let me get Bill in here to follow up on some of that. Bill?
Mayor, is it possible that we could stay at phase 2, but see some conditions change in phase 2, like the capacity that businesses can operate at?
Yeah, I think that's possible. So the idea is, how do you create a recovery that is careful and responsible. And so there may be industries, there may be one-off businesses that are able to demonstrate that they can satisfactorily open and maintain safety for their clients or customers. So it's a case-by-case basis. It is an ongoing work because every organization, every operation is very different. But yes, there are lots of different scenarios where you could see one-offs based on the capability of that particular industry or that particular business to safely reopen.
All right. And there's been a lot of discussion, and you've been asked a lot about the City Council's mask ordinance and why the health department is still at a recommendation for it. This seems to be a legal point, doesn't it?
So I'm not actually real aware of what the legal issues are. Here is our perspective. Our perspective in Shelby County is we want to do whatever we can to support our cities. And in this time of global health pandemic, we certainly want to support our cities if they want to adopt more stringent protocols. And so to the extent the city of Memphis has adopted a mandatory mask ordinance and followed the right process for that adoption, Shelby County wants to be supportive of that. We do think that that is one tactic, one tool that can help slow the spread. So if there is a way, to get more people wearing masks, and one of those ways to get more people wearing masks is the city council passes an ordinance that requires it within city limits, I'm all for that. And so that's kind of where it sits, is all of us would like to see more people wearing masks, and all of us are open to any strategy that gets us to more people wearing masks.
Mm-hmm. There's so much data that you could pretty much pick and choose what you wanted to in it. But as you said earlier, this is about analysis of it. And it's interesting because people will say, well, it must have been the Memorial Day weekend that produced it, or it must have been the number of protests that we had. And actually, it's kind of harder to get at what the exact cause is of this, isn't it?
It's very hard, and it's very hard to make judgments if you make judgments just based on those raw numbers. Remember, we're a community of 1 million residents. And so to a certain extent, a raw number of 100 cases and a raw number on another day of 200 cases or on another day of 50 cases is practically the same when you're talking about a community of 1 million folks. So yes, you've got to try to dig a little deeper as to what's going on. We gave 1,000 tests, or almost 1,000 tests at the corrections facility. And so that, so there's a lot of different kinds of inputs that go into the analysis of trying to figure out whether or not we are slowing the spread or not slowing the spread. The other thing I should mention is this is another frank reality, we'll never probably bend this thing to zero. Right, we'll never bend our raw numbers to zero, and we'll never bend our raw numbers to zero because we're not in control of our borders, right? And so there will always be new cases that enter Memphis and Shelby County for the rest of the year and probably for the rest of our lives because we don't control our borders, and so the virus will continue. Remember, in human history, I don't think there's been a virus that has ever been eradicated except for one. I think smallpox, with about 200 years worth of effort, was eradicated. So there are things we can do. We can slow the spread. We can get to a point that's an important milestone, like the production of a vaccine. But this is going to be a long slog. And so we've got to figure out, how do we conduct ourselves in this new environment?
That whole part of that notion of living with it gets back, I think, in a lot of ways to contact tracing, right? We accept that there's going to be a certain number of people going to get it. People are going to come in from outside, but we need to understand where the clusters are and where the hotspots are. Does the county have enough contact tracing capacity right now?
No, we could always expand and have more investment in our public health department, and specifically in the contact tracing operation, because that's the process by which you interview your confirmed case and figure out the network, the constellation of contacts that your confirmed case has interacted with in between. And then you can say, hey, try to quarantine those individuals, and in so doing, slow the spread. So we need to continue to expand our public health capacity. We will be in this mode for the foreseeable future, and it's really an important tool in the toolkit to try to stop the spread.
Do you have the money at the county level? Didn't you get some federal money to support contact tracing? Is that enough? I mean, is it in a time, and we'll get to budget eventually. I mean, it's a bad economy to say the least, and the county is working through a difficult budget, the city as well. Do you have enough money to hire the number of contact tracers you need?
I think we have enough money through the end of the year. So the federal money we received was about $50 million, and that lasts through the end of the year. And so through the end of the year, you'll see increase in expanding testing because we have the money. You'll also see us pick up a lot of contact tracing capabilities. But what happens next year? I've said that we need to make some permanent investments in our public health department. In fact, the budget that I proposed included increases in our health department. And so that's the kind of mindset and the perspective I hope we have throughout the rest of this term. Right. And so we'll see if I can persuade the county commissioners that that's a worthy long-term investment to make sure that our health department has the resources that it needs.
Just a quick clarification. When you say you have enough money for this year, do you mean this budget year or this calendar year? Just so
calendar year, the next 6 months. Through the end of December. Okay.
Yes. We talked about business, and you talked about recovery, that we need to and I'll define recovery. Does recovery mean economic recovery? Does it mean us returning to normal and seeing friends and family? Expand a little bit about when you say we need to, and maybe I'm misquoting you here, but I was fascinated by how you said that we need to be focused on recovery and to some degree accept a certain amount of community spread of this virus. But maybe I misquoted you.
Well, I think that, yeah, you're right. We could get into a philosophical discussion around community and what it takes to have community. But I think that's kind of what I meant, that at some point we're going to have to grapple with, this is a community. And what do we need for community for community to be real? So one of the things that I talk about is you can't have a community if your kids never leave the house. You can't have a community if your kids never have a safe place to go other than their bedroom and the kitchen. At some point, if you're going to have a true community, kids have to have a safe place to go, whether or not that's the schools, the libraries, the community centers, et cetera. And there is some level of trauma associated with kids not being able to move around, that next generation coming up in this kind of environment. So all those things have to be grappled with. So I just meant that at some point we're going to have to really confront, what does community mean and what do we need to really have a community? Do we need the schools to be open? Do we need kids out and about? Do we need to go back to work? Do we need daycares? What is the essential ingredient that makes community? Because that's what I'm chasing after. I just want to make sure that we're in a position to have a community, even if it's a new normal, and even if it's a community that we could not have imagined even 6 months ago.
And one more quickish question, then I'll go to Bill. You mentioned, Bill had asked you about, businesses that changing some of the criteria for when businesses can open, what types of businesses, how they might change. If someone's listening and they run a business or they're involved with a business, and right now they're not allowed to open, but they think they can make a case that, hey, if we do X, Y, and Z, we think we can open safely. Is there a process for them to apply to be allowed to open, and what should they do?
So the health department has set up a website where they can submit their reopening plans. And those reopening plans are reviewed by public health and medical professionals to ascertain whether or not a business can safely reopen. So at the end of the day, we shouldn't kind of view all of this as an either or, that either we're closed and safe or open and unsafe. We can have a path to recovery and still be safe at the same time. And it's how do you go about creating plans and a process such that people can engage in some level of community and still be safe for their families and for their customers and so forth.
Okay, and they go to the Shelby County Health Department to make that application. Let me go to Bill.
Mayor, as we mentioned earlier, the county has a budget for the new fiscal year that begins July 1st after several very long meetings and lots of discussion. This budget season seemed kind of rough. to me. What was your assessment of how things went with the county commission?
So this is a really challenging time in terms of budgets. You see it all across the country. I've said a bunch of things around our budget. One of the things I've said, though, is you can't miss an opportunity to advance the public interest, no matter what the challenge, no matter what budget year you are in. And so this budget year, no different than any other budget that I've participated in, I've said we need to invest in community more. We need to make sure we create more opportunities for kids, and we need to invest in neighborhoods more. And so we identify substantial investments we can make on all of those fronts. That met up against the county commission that really was in a cutting mode. And so the budget process this year was about what could be cut and how much could be cut and how deeply could we cut. Now, I'm all for being responsible in terms of spending, being careful in terms of spending, and I'm in favor of some level of cuts. But I do believe that the folks that elected this group would like to see us do more in terms of education and our community services, our social safety net, criminal justice reforms, transit. And so these are opportunities that we cannot delay. These are investments that we should make no matter how hard it is. It's hard this year. It's going to be hard next year. It's going to be hard the year after that. And you've got to always, during the budget process or in any role you play as a public official, try as best you can to summon the political courage to address long-standing issues. And so, I'll continue to bring that message to the county commission. You're right, Bill. This was a hard budget process because they decided they were going to make a whole lot of cuts. I think that that'll end up meaning that some of these vital programs will be eroded, and that we will see some county jobs put in jeopardy as a result of that. And we won't do as much good as we can do. So that's, we won't advance the public interest as much as we could. So I'll keep fighting for the public interest, and we'll see where it lands.
You proposed a wheel tax hike that I think a majority on the commission decided to reject probably as soon as they heard you make the proposal. On the other hand, Reginald Milton, the county commissioner, proposed an 8-cent property tax hike that only had 4 votes, including his own, on the commission. So when you talk about an erosion in programs, will there be layoffs with this new budget that the commission approved? Will there be cuts in what you consider to be vital services by the county?
We are managing through the budget process right now. Some of this will not be knowable for a couple of weeks, but the short answer is it is almost certainly the case that county jobs will have been put in jeopardy by the level of cuts that the commission approved. It is almost certainly the case that vital programs will have to adjust and retreat from their mission because of the cuts that were approved in this budget. So, I can't tell you right now whether or not the health department's clinics that are throughout the community will all close down or whether we will cut the hours. But what I can tell you is the cut to the health department will mean that it will have an impact on some level to the vital programs that it delivers in the community. And so we're going to have to manage through that. Our priority is, of course, to preserve as many jobs as possible and to preserve as many of the programs that the community relies on as possible. But it'll have negative impact. Again, we have an opportunity to meet the moment. And I don't know if we necessarily met the moment here or elsewhere, by the way. It's not just here on the county commission side. It's everywhere, right? I don't know if I've seen substantial investments this year anywhere in our community, in social safety net, in community services, in criminal justice reforms, right? The conversation has been dominated, and we can argue about whether right or wrong, dominated by the need to cut programs and so forth. And that's just not my perspective here. I think you just can't miss a moment to advance the public interest, and you can't ever make excuses.
All right, but before I send it back to Eric, was there any part in the budget process where you considered going to the commission and saying, okay, here's a counter offer, here's something else you might want to consider? Because it looked to me like they basically rebuilt this thing from the ground up?
Yeah, well, we worked closely with the commission throughout the process and flagged the importance of the programs that would be put in the crosshairs by the drastic cuts that were made this budget year, and tried as best we can to make the case. But for whatever reason, the conversation has just been dominated by, partly it's dominated by just the conservative politics. Remember when we talked about transit way back when, we had the Republican Party come in and say, hey, don't vote on transit, right? Don't vote for transit. And the Republican Party made that case. And then, partly because of that and probably a bunch of other reasons, the county commission never brought transit to a vote. And so there's an opportunity to actually advance the public interest, help people get to work, make sure that you establish some basic transportation opportunities for those in need. And the issue is not even brought to a vote in this commission, and it becomes again around, how do you cut and how do you not invest? So transit was an opportunity. Obviously, I'd prefer to get something done on the $500 million in deferred maintenance that the school system right now has. Right? People have been talking about that for years. We can summon the will to do something about the $500 million in deferred maintenance. There is no one else to blame for the problems except for us. And I think everybody sometimes loses sight of that you have schools with roofs that leak, and kids in classrooms that are too hot and too cold, and everybody pretends like there's someone else who should be doing something about it. The people who should be doing something about it are us. And so as a down payment on that $500 million in deferred maintenance, of course, I put $65 million extra in the 5-year plan for Fraser to say, let's build a new high school in Fraser and let's start taking care of some of these issues. And let's make that a down payment on $1 billion investments in the schools. But we couldn't get that kind of transformative vision to be shared by the county commission. And again, that we kind of slipped into this conservative mode of just talking about what we could cut. And so the Fraser High School ended up on the cutting room floor, unfortunately.
Well, nationally, locally, when you talk about budgets and you talk about spending, a big line item, obviously, in the county budget is criminal justice, the sheriff's department, police, not the Memphis Police Department, but the jail. I mean, is there any, I guess, your reaction to the protests and the national outcry, and also what sort of change is possible within the criminal justice elements that are under the county's purview, not the city's?
So I think that there's a lot of change that's possible. I think you need the sustained outside engagement, and we seem to have that. We have that from Micah, and we have that from a host of other activists and protest groups. So you got to have that sustained engagement, and you also have to have the inside game as well. So you've got to have a group of individuals on the inside of government that are committed to making some of these criminal justice oriented changes. So, I've talked about what some of those might look like. It is an increase or an investment in social safety net, an increase in access to health. It's an increase in community services, right? Those kinds of things can be done, particularly now in this environment where you have the outside agitation. You just got to have the inside pieces too. And so we continue to work on that. The good news is you continue to see fresh voices come into a lot of these local offices. And as we see that change and see more fresh voices come into these local offices, you stand a better chance of getting the inside dynamics right, where you can get something to happen. Did it happen this first budget cycle? Or this last budget cycle? I guess it wasn't the first, this last one. Anywhere in our community? No, I don't think anybody moved any money to community services. I don't think anybody moved any extra money to criminal justice reform. So it's a missed moment, but it's going to come around again on the inside. We have other opportunities on the inside to do something to meet the challenges that everybody knows have persisted for a very long time.
Are you on, again, just speaking just about the county policing or county criminal justice, would you like to see more of the sheriff's office defunded? I mean, there's the defund the police cry nationally. Is in your case, it would be, I assume, the sheriff's office.
What I'd like to see is the more community policing. And the reality is, if you're going to have more community policing, it actually requires more investment in law enforcement. Because what you would really want to see is police officers that sometimes walk their beats without firearms. What you'd really like to see is police officers who get to know a neighborhood and the residents of a neighborhood. What you'd really like to see is law enforcement officers at your community centers, in your libraries, interacting with the public, with the public more regularly. In order to have that happen, you've got to kind of have your baseline that can respond to 911 calls. And on top of that, you build your community policing. So it's actually pretty difficult to do with cuts, right? With cuts, you can't invest in community with cuts. So I'm taking your word defund literally. If you just mean rearrange, that may be a little bit something different. But if you talk about defund literally,
right,
you can't make investments if you are defunding, when what you really need to do is invest so that you could have these pieces of community built into the process.
All right. Well, we are out of time. Thank you very much, Mayor Harris, for joining us. We appreciate it. Thank you, Bill. And thank you for joining us. Please join us again next week. And remember that you can get past episodes of Behind the Headlines on the WKNO.org website, as well as the podcast of the show on the Daily Memphian site or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.